Okay, so this is JLB Sometimes Record, a new series, episode number 4. Big time special guest on this episode, IPS or Tim Osman. What do you prefer, IPS or Tim Osman? Which moniker would you rather go with?
I go by Tim because what happens is I don't want to be conflated with the IPS, and it's more than just me. And then also, if I do something, I don't want it to be blamed on everybody else.
That makes perfect sense. All right, well, it's good to have you back on the show. We last saw you for a call about a month ago in December of 2019. It's now January 22 in the year of 2020. A lot of twos in there. That's for me. I'm here in Chiang Mai, Thailand. You're coming to us from the United States, so it's still January 21 for yourself. And it's good to have you back. There's a lot to talk about. Here's what I've got on my little rundown here. For hour one, we want to talk about Brian Stavely and what's been happening with him over the last month. This is a guy who has a lot of influence in his little corner of the internet. You've been paying a lot of attention. I'll be honest, I haven't. We're going to talk about Mark Sargent chatting with Russian vids. Again, in this corner of the internet, these are big names. They had a chat. A lot of truth bombshells came out of that one. Not necessarily truth, more like faux truth. We'll talk about that. And then a whole bunch of comments that have been left for you on my website. Anticipation of you joining us. Then we want to talk about this Jonah the Science Guy, whatever he calls himself. I didn't know very much about this guy until the last 48 hours. So I understand you know a thing or two about this guy. We're going to talk about that. And also, I want to spend some time talking with you about advertising alternative ideas, which we did touch on in our first call a month ago. But I think this is something that's very important because in this little subculture, Tim, there's this taboo about using the techniques and the methods that are used in every other field to share ideas. There's taboo in our subculture, which is holding a lot of people back. But those of us who can break through the taboo, I think we can have success. So we're going to talk about all of these things and more. How does all of that sound?
Sounds great, and I definitely like the idea of keeping the stuff regarding Jonah the Scientist in the second hour because I prefer that he doesn't hear it unless he pays.
Well, I've got so much to say about all of that. The thing is, we're doing this Sometimes Record series. I have a series where I do a lot of post-production on the calls. This is a series where I try and keep it just as natural as it is. No inserting clips if I can avoid it. No spending an hour or two editing everything. Just keeping it pretty much how it was when it was recorded. Now, we do have a few people listening to this in the room with us right now. If they want to take themselves off mute and join us at some point in the call, they're welcome to do so. We might hit them an hour or two. But for now, it's just you and me there, Tim. So let's get straight into it. Last time we spoke, Brian Stavely took up some part of the call, and not just him, but the Mandela effect in general. Can you recap, for someone who might be listening to this for the first time, this Mandela effect, why did you start paying attention to it? What's your history with Stavely? Give us an introduction to how it all started, and then we'll start catching up from there.
Excellent. Okay, well, my relationship with Brian Stavely started with my efforts to start reaching out to other people who were auto-hoaxing, who were deconstructing the media. And so for me, when I met the guy, I pretty much saw his work on 9/11, and I said, okay, this is great. Because for me, what we're actually doing is we're exposing the discrepancies between reality and the media misrepresentation. So I thought we were on the same sheet. I knew he was interested in the Mandela effect, which I always treated as a joke. I lost my keys. It got Mandela to another universe. And that was pretty much my start with him. But then after our conversation, I looked into the Mandela effect to figure it out. And when I looked into it, I thought, well, there's got to be more to it. There has to be other explanations. And this is where I think he and I kind of split, because instead of embracing this information that might have him reassess how he arrived at these conclusions, he doubled down on his, what I believe to be what I know to be a mystification of misremembrances. And he's not even open to considering the causes of these misremembrances. So as this, it wasn't even a debate so much as a back and forth. He would respond to my criticisms of his statements. One of his statements was, everybody knows Ed McMahon handed out big checks. Everybody knows Timmy fell down the well. And my first response is, well, you can just disregard such a logical fallacy. But then two, if you scratch the surface, these things have nothing behind them. Everybody knows Timmy fell down the well, they say, but they don't know how he was taken out. So if you scratch, you find that these memories that they're citing aren't real memories. And I believe it's more or less the interaction of the interrogator and the person, the affectee, that creates the effect. Well, that information has not only not been well received, but it has started something of a war where there's now kind of a line in the sand here where the people who want to believe the Mandela effect is a legitimate reflection of changes in the universe, they're kind of forming a circle. And anyone who doesn't believe is seen as working for the false version of reality. Now, that's all well and good. I don't care about somebody's personal solipsism or their own view of the world. However, I just think it's a massive contradiction to, on the one hand, talk about 9/11 being a hoax, and on the second hand, saying reality itself is a hoax. Because if reality is not real, the news can't be fake. You have to have a standard of reality to measure it against. So that's kind of where we're at. We advance it forward. I published a short book called Mandoozled explaining what I believe the phenomenon is, and I think that's the final word on it. And in the last week, he has been aggressively pitching it, and I watched him go first to Crow 777, Nathan Thompson, and Russian Vids, trying to pitch them on the Mandela effect, and he got rebuffed at each one. Nathan Thompson said the Bible can't change. Crow 777 said it's some type of a trick, and Russian Vids called it a psyop. So this Mandela effect that they're trying to inject into the flat earth mainstream is actually not gaining a lot of traction. So that's where we are now a month forward.
So it seems to me as though Stavely successfully seeded the Mandela effect meme into flat earth, and he says openly, you can find him saying in his own live streams that this was his intention. His intention was to get all of the leading flat earth people talking about Mandela effect. Okay, and he's proud of it. He's proud of what he's accomplished in this regard. So from what you've just said, it sounds as though he's tried to do the same thing with Crow, Russian Vids, and Nathan Thompson, but they're not having any of it, is what you're saying.
Right, and except the difference is, when we had nothing of it, he chastised us, called us NPCs, zombies, and shills. In his video calling a spade, he called me a shill trying to shut down the Mandela effect. But when Crow 777, someone he respects, Russian Vids, someone he respects, said it didn't exist, he got very quiet and didn't press the issue, which I found to be very interesting.
I guess he was being diplomatic then, because I haven't actually listened to those calls, to tell you the truth. I haven't listened to the Crow 777 one, which, by the way, Crow 777 is a big name in this scene. Like, he has thousands and thousands of views for each thing that he puts out. What was the response like from his audience?
I think Crow 777's audience, they actually see the Mandela effect as possibly related to the lunar wave, from what I've seen in many of the comments. An interesting correlation, like it's part of the same phenomenon. Now, and Crow, his view on it was simply the simplest explanation is most likely, so it's probably going to be a trick. But after the video, Stavely did double down and say everyone is affected. They're just in denial or they're afraid. So despite it not going over with them, he's just like, well, they'll be saved later. So he does have a lot of, I think, confidence that this thing is eventually going to take over.
Well, you've got to give him credit for putting the effort into what he believes in. I mean, I know that many of your fans have no good things to say about Stavely, but I do kind of admire how he's made it his plan to spread Mandela effect. He wants to be the guy who seeds this meme into the rest of the conspiracy subculture, and he's not going to stop until he succeeds, from what I can tell. I kind of admire that tenacity. Do you know what I mean?
I do too, and that's why when we originally spoke, we spoke about 9/11 for 45 minutes and then 15 minutes on the Mandela effect. And I didn't think too much of it until it became this way of judging people who weren't going along with it. That's when I really kind of gave it a second look. But even now, I understand where he's going with it, but what I don't think you can do is I don't think you can mix deconstructing the news media and calling it hoaxy, and at the same time saying that reality itself is subjective. I think that's kind of a massive contradiction, philosophically, and I don't know how you can rectify it.
And that's exactly what we spoke about in our first call a month ago. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes or in the comments section below, wherever I upload this one. Of course, we're going to stream this one. We're going to premiere this first hour on your channel as well. So we'll make sure there's a link to that first call that we had a month ago in the info box of your premiere. So moving on then, so we spoke about Stavely and how you first came to know about him. Now he's been on all these channels and he's still trying to promote his Mandela effect meme. And the audience of Crow 777 are trying to tie it into Lunar Wave or something you said. What's your opinion, Tim, on Lunar Wave?
The lunar wave is one of three things in my opinion. It's either wingtip vortices or he's holding a blowtorch near the camera, creating a wave, or he's using a vibrating mechanism on the tripod. Like, in other words, I don't think it's the moon. I think the most likely explanation is it's the camera. And given his level of experience, I'm forced to conclude that it's some type of I guess you would call it an error or a glitch, but I believe it's being intentionally created. And I actually raised this question after I spoke with him. And the response was, he goes on to Globebusters and they talk about how it couldn't be a wave from a wingtip because only, in their view, only supersonic jets would do that, which is just not true. So I
Did you
kind of
speak
think
with Crow 777? Sorry to interrupt you there. Did you actually speak to Crow 777?
yes, I did. In fact, there was a video that came out with this professor talking about the moon being a plasma. And right after that came out, he was the first person I thought about. So I called him to talk about the lunar wave in conjunction with this plasma. And we had a nice talk. It was about an hour or so. And after that, kind of similar with this Brian Staveley thing, I re-examined closely what he was saying. And I was kind of left to conclude that the lunar wave is not an authentic phenomenon.
All right, let me give you my take. What if you were to put a camera, what if you were to fill, say, a big plastic tub with water, and then you take a camera and you point it down at the water at nighttime so as to have a reflection of the moon in the camera's focus. But the camera is only focused on the water, it can't see that it's in a tub, so it looks still. Because it's still, you don't even know that you're looking at a reflection, and then you just dip your finger in the water outside of the shot of the camera, and then that little ripple could make a ripple on the moon, couldn't it? I mean, this is just an idea that I'm throwing out there, but from the first moment that I saw this so-called lunar wave, I was like, really? People have fallen for this? That'd be so easy to fake. Even we could fake that right now if we wanted to. Whether we use your blowtorch idea or I use my little water bathtub idea. I mean, are people really falling for this? And apparently they did. Apparently the lunar wave, a lot of people to this day still believe in it, Tim. What do you think about all of this?
Okay, here's something that I find interesting. One, that experiment would probably work. And two, scientifically, if you're just following any kind of a methodology, you would probably rule out the moon changing before some type of mechanical error or deliberate tampering. And I had to rule out mechanical error because of his expertise with the camera. And that alone makes me think it's deliberate. So I'm kind of left at that. And I think you're right. It could easily be replicated. And then one other thing, the reason why I even went that direction is a friend of mine was familiar with this phenomenon. He lives near an airport. He called it wingtip vortices, and I looked into it. Well, he actually commented on many of Crow's videos and had those comments on those videos deleted. So when I see censorship like that, I think they're trying to hide something.
So with this lunar wave thing, just for those who are listening, then maybe they're not familiar with what I do and my opinions on a whole bunch of things. Basically, I don't believe the moon is a real place you can go to. Okay, I don't believe it's some physical place in the sky that you can launch a spaceship to, and dudes can walk around and drive dune buggies and play golf and stuff. I don't believe it's a real place. I don't believe any of what we see in the night sky is a solid physical object at all. So my problem with lunar wave isn't any of that. It's just this idea that, hey, so what? You've got some footage that supposedly shows a wave going through the moon. Big deal. So what? But that was the thing that Crow 777 used to break through in the scene. This was back in 2015, if memory serves me. Because that was at the time when Flat Earth was just becoming a big thing as well. And from memory, David Weiss, who was on the Baller Skeptic Roundtable with myself, and he was doing a lot of the booking of the guests, from memory, he tried to get Crow 777 on the show, and Crow wouldn't come on for whatever reason. Not that I cared. I mean, we had the two Flat Earthers on the panel, and myself, and it was just like, well, whoever you guys book, that's fine. You book them, and I'll chat with them, we'll chat with them, no problems. So the fact that Crow didn't want to come on at the time was no big deal. But at the time, he was no bigger than all the other people in the scene. Whereas since then, it's fair to say he's become quite a success in this little sphere, Tim, isn't it? I mean, he's got his own membership model. He's got a lot of fans. In terms of getting his idea to lots of people, he has become successful.
Well, actually, we've spoken twice. The first time I spoke to him was, in fact, the day of the shooting in Las Vegas, October the 1st, 2017, because I was 20 minutes into my analysis and my channel was pulled. He had the same issue. And so he, myself, Smoke and Mirrors, and PK had a 1 or 2 hour conference call to discuss the future of YouTube, because that's when the MSM pretty much openly took over. So we had actually spoken twice. And again, I have a great deal of respect for people who are trying to maintain that objective reality matters, and that we got to, it's a matter of real versus fake. And if we don't call out the fakery in the news, it becomes our fake history. And so I respect people who do that. And I always find it odd when they're attached to something else that contradicts their usual objectivity, which I'm fine with. Like, I don't care if a doctor or a scientist or a brain surgeon, also is religious. That's not really my issue. But my issue here is intellectual honesty. And so it would be fine if he found out later, oh, this was being caused by the airplanes, or this was caused by some other phenomenon to my camera. And then saying, good thing it happened because now I have, reached a lot of open-minded people. But instead, he doubles down on it. And now if you look at his videos, he's seeing other phenomenon, like a second sun, things that can be easily replicated and things that a professional photographer should be well aware of as, a flaw, a mechanical error.
Well, something else I should add too, is for listeners who, again, are not familiar with my stance on things, they'll probably come back and say, oh, but JLB, it wasn't just Crow who found the lunar wave. There was 4 or 5 other people, and who knows how many there is now. I haven't followed Crow's work for a long time, but at a certain point there was 5 or 6 other people, and they've also got footage of this lunar wave, and it's like, okay, firstly, let's pretend those other people exist, and this isn't just Crow saying, oh, I've got these other videos, and they've been sent to me from people around the world, right? Let's say that these actually are other people who captured the so-called lunar wave themselves. So what? Big deal. Just as you can fake one of these videos, anyone could fake their own video, couldn't they? And if someone comes back to me and says, oh, why would someone do that? Because people lie all the time, especially for attention. So if you've got someone with a YouTube channel with thousands of subscribers who's saying, hey, guys, I've got this footage of a wave going through the moon, there's going to be people out there who are like, I would love that attention as well. Let me send him a video of the same so-called phenomenon. Bang, now they're getting attention, you see? Now, am I saying that is what happened? No, I don't know. But the point is, it could be the case so easily. This stuff could be faked so easily. Why would I give it any weight? Is the point I'm trying to make here. And I'm not sure if I'm articulating this well enough, Tim, at 9:30 in the morning here in beautiful Chiang Mai. But do you get what I'm trying to say here? I'm not saying that Crow did fake it, or that his so-called, supporters or whoever's sending those videos are also fake. I don't know. What I'm saying is they easily could. So why take this stuff seriously? I haven't seen this so-called lunar wave, and I've spent a lot of time looking at the moon and recording the moon. I've never seen the wave myself, and the people who say they have could easily be faking it. So why should I give it so much time? Why should I believe in it? Do you get my point?
Absolutely. It's a standard of evidence thing. Like, I find Bigfoot interesting, UFOs interesting, Mandela effects, or any kind of effects like that. These things are interesting, supernatural, paranormal, but I think it belongs in that category where he shouldn't even be positing this as objective reality. Like, this is evidence of something that happened without having done some due diligence. And I don't think he's done any, because Occam's razor would say your camera goofed up, rather than this extraordinary claim that he's the one guy in the world who caught this. But what's more, if you dig a little deeper, you find that he also has witnessed UFOs and flying saucers. And the thing is, I'm not a paranoid person, but with regards to UFOs, it's well known, and there's a good documentary called Mirage Men that I just watched about a month ago about how the Air Force and the intelligence agencies actually created most of the UFO sightings and the myths and the abduction stories as a way of hiding actual military secrets by any observer. So I see people sowing the same type of misinformation for fun and for profit. And to me, that's just what it looks like. It looks like rehashed, regurgitated government propaganda. And any type of sighting, doesn't count as evidence.
That's another issue. Sorry to cut you off there. That's another issue with Crow 777. I remember listening to him and him saying stuff about black helicopters being sent to come and spy on him. And at the time, look, I haven't listened to him for years now, so I can't comment on what he's saying today. I can only go on what I remember from a couple of years ago. But he really was spreading this idea that people should be worried about, if we say the wrong things, the government's going to come and spy on us. They're going to send black helicopters. Like, it was kind of like Alex Jones light, you know what I'm trying to say? And I think if you've got a platform and an audience, the idea that you would try and spread fear to them, something about that doesn't sit well with me. You know what I mean? Like, there are some bad things in the world, for sure. But this idea of trying to tell people, oh, look, I'm telling you the truth, so now the government's sending helicopters to come and spy on me. There's something about that I just, you get where I'm going with this? Nothing. I'm not trying to have a go at Crow. And again, congratulations to him for being so successful. He's managed to build up his website and his audience. Heaps of respect for me for that. But this black helicopter nonsense, man, come on.
I will say this, and this is one of the reasons I reached out to him after Vegas. He was one of the first to recognize the uselessness of YouTube and how it was going to go downhill. So he made a leap right away to his own platform and this $5 a month thing with quality research, time put into it. So yeah, I've always liked his work, but I'm at the point where I'm trying to sift between real and fake, and anybody sowing fear, whether it's chemtrails or there's poison in the water, there's so many just really, I think, to be cliches, conspiracy cliches, and they're all fear-based. And I think these are all, in many ways, secular superstitions.
Well, you do make a good point about the good research, because I said that I haven't followed Crow's work for years, but someone did send me, I think one of the members of my website sent me a link to Crow's talk, this is from months ago, might be 6 months ago now, talking about the advent, the creation of CNN and the timing of it with the O.J. Simpson trial and one of the space missions. And some of the stuff that Crow and his I don't know, sidekick, co-panelist, whatever it was, some of the stuff they brought up, I had no idea about. So I went and double-checked, and I was like, oh, this is legit. Like the time, they've noticed the timing of these events. Because CNN, people like you and me, we grew up with it. You know what I mean? Like I'm 32, so we grew up in a time where there's 24/7 news. And we even had CNN on our paid television provider in Australia called Foxtel. So from a young age, there's been 24/7 news for me and for you. But there hasn't always been 24/7 news. Once upon a time, it was just at a regular time every day. So how did they go to 24/7 news? Well, CNN just happens to come along at the same time as a couple of major events. And I learned all of this, or I heard all of this from Crow 777 a few months ago. So I'm not dissing all of his research. He's done some good research. And again, good on him for the platform. You've got to give credit where it's due. He's done very well to build up his platform. But it's just the fear porn stuff that, why would I want to listen to that? I know for a fact that I can build up my own website and speak whatever truth I like. There's no black helicopters coming to get me, or you, Tim, for that matter. So that's one of my issues with him. But we need to move on. We've got a few more things to talk about here. So we've talked about Stavely. We've talked about how you got to know him. We've talked about some of his recent interviews. Have you got any other updates for us about Stavely, or should we move on to the next topic?
I think we probably should move on to the next topic because, as I've said, they haven't moved on beyond the intellectual dishonesty. And every time I hear a new Mandela effect, I just have to ask questions that follow up with it, and just to show people how illogical it is. And just one more thing, I have been toying with this idea, just kind of as a thought experiment. They will say that it used to be Jif peanut butter. No, I'm sorry, it used to be Jiffy, then became Jif. And so I looked into it. And I thought, what if we were to private label our own peanut butter and call it Jiffy? Could they get us for infringement if enough Mandela-affected people make the claim that it used to be the other way? I mean, and my point being, it's just such an absurd proposition that there might actually be some interesting questions raised if somebody were to take some of these Mandela-affected things that aren't supposed to exist and produce them. So I've been asking people, take that script you remember from that Genie movie that wasn't and sell it to Hollywood. But like I said, you scratch the surface, there's no real substance behind their claims to having these memories. So, no, it's a dead end.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I heard you mention this in one of your more recent calls, this idea of, you were saying that you can buy a huge quantity of like white label peanut butter. You said that you can buy it in quantities, batches of 300 and then have it stamped with your own logo, right? So you were thinking of raising the money to buy 300 bottles of white label peanut butter. Can you talk us through, is that right, 300 you'd need to buy?
Oh yeah, it's a very simple process. So white label refers to generic products where you contact the producer, you send him your logo, and you buy it in bulk and it's yours. And you can say it's mine, but it's just generic with your logo. So I thought, let's create Jiffy peanut butter according to the Mandela affected description of what it was. And I looked into it, and it turns out if you go to Alibaba, you can actually get 300 jars of private label peanut butter for about $300. And I said, let's just send them to a distributor or maybe send them to homeless shelters. And if it sells well, maybe we could pay somebody to dress up as Ed McMahon and deliver Stavely a big check.
And we should give more context for my audience, some of whom won't know about this Jiffy thing. So there's a brand of peanut butter in America called Jif. And the Mandela effect believers, some of them, think it used to be called Jiffy. So they think that it's changed from Jiffy to Jif. Am I right so far?
Exactly.
And so what you want to do is release your own Jiffy brand of peanut butter. And then sell
Market,
it.
and market to them. Got to be 300 Mandela effectees who will buy my peanut butter. And I'm like, we could raise some serious money and then actually, I don't know, reinvest in some other, what they call residue.
It's a shame that you announced this publicly, though, because I think this would have worked. Once they know that it's from you, they won't buy it because obviously they hate you, yeah? But if you were to have done this on the down low and then like Google AdWord or Facebook target these people, you know, make your advertisements targeted to people who are interested in Mandela effect, I think you could have sold the 300 at a huge markup and made yourself some decent cash. Like, how much does it cost for 300 tubs? Do you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah, with Alibaba 300, of course, there's going to be, with distribution is where you lose your money, but you could do a markup. And yeah, I had actually thought about this, and someone showed me how someone created a Duff beer based on Homer Simpson's brand, got hit with a trademark and had to shut it down, but that the few that were still circulating went up in price. So, you know, it might still be worth making a move. You know, I probably didn't announce it to a large enough audience to where we might still do something similar. I mean, we could really take any one of these hypothetical products that never existed and actually make it.
Yeah, but I love the idea of the peanut butter because peanut butter, from what I understand, it doesn't spoil very quickly. So if you had to hold on to the stock for a while, it wouldn't be a big deal. But with this Alibaba thing, is that where they send you the full batch of 300, then you have to then redistribute it? Or is it kind of like fulfillment by Amazon, where when someone orders it, they then send it to them directly?
It's both. Generally, with Alibaba, you would just have the individual item shipped from them, which you would call drop shipping. But with private label, they usually want a larger commitment, so you have to buy a minimum order. But I don't have time to do distribution, so what I would do is I would send it to a fulfillment center, whether it's Amazon or you can find other companies, not hard to find. You can find companies where you send them your packages, and when you get an order, they process it. So you would take that work out of your hands.
Well, I think you could make money doing this. I think it's a terrific idea. So if you were to ever go ahead with it, I'd hope you'd let me know ahead of time so I could invest in your venture, because I think it's very clever. And yeah, when I was listening to that last night, I was listening to one of your recent calls to try and remember some of the main topics you talk about and get up to speed on what you're saying. And when you mentioned that one, yeah, I found it very amusing. So that's good. That's outside of the box thinking. I like it. All right, so Stavely, we've spoken about Mandela Effect, Crow 777. All right, so Mark Sargent and Russian Vids recently had a conversation. Mark Sargent, the guy responsible for the Flat Earth Clues, Part 1, Empty Theater, right? He's a guy who really put Flat Earth on the map at the beginning of 2015. He spoke with Russian Vids, who's been a big name in conspiracy for how long now? Going back to probably 2013, maybe earlier. So we're talking 7 years, maybe longer, Russian Vids. The two of them got together, had a chat recently. Tim, give me your thoughts on all of this.
Yes, so Russian Vids is someone who's kind of a staple of this entire community. He's one of the first persons as far as auto hoaxers go that I used to follow. Not that I agreed with his conclusions or his focus on the color orange or the number 33. I didn't understand all of that, but I liked his approach to jumping on top of every breaking story and dissecting it and analyzing it without assuming it to be true. So definitely, I appreciated a lot of his early work. He is, friendly with everybody within the flat Earth community. He's a domer. He believes there's a dome. I find him to be a little shady in that he hides behind a cartoon moniker, and he's never made any appearances for somebody who, is so vocal. It's like, well, what is he hiding exactly? So on Mark Sargent's little hangout, one of the first points he made was he said that Eric Dubay is a phony because he never goes out to meet anybody, which of course I'm like, well, kind of describes Russian Vids. But the video by and large seemed to be, I think, catching people up on where Mark is, and especially with regards to these accusations of shillery. You know, he's constantly being accused of having other people, I guess, pulling his strings. And interestingly enough, a couple of things as a result of that interview have come out. I mean, it is a statement from his own mouth that 3 weeks into his YouTube channel, in fact, He was already talking about a documentary being created about him. He was already a card-carrying member of the Flat Earth Society before 2015, so it's a continuity error in his story to say he found Flat Earth on YouTube when he was already a card-carrying member. So there's a few little continuity errors there, but pretty much I think he was more or less not really bothered by the Jake Bird thing with Comedy Central. And so for people who haven't watched it, Jake Bird was a character actor who went undercover on behalf of Jimmy Kimmel to ridicule the Flat Earthers at the conference. And Mark Sargent took part in a skit. And so this is kind of what has caused, I think, Mark to come out and sort of defend the idea that all publicity is good publicity, which I think a lot of the other people around him are having misgivings about now.
Okay, well, one of the things that came out of this Sargent with Russian Vids chat was what Sargent had to say about Patricia Steer. And the thing is, Tim, I got away from Flat Earth for years. I said, that's it, I'm done, not paying attention. But when I heard Sargent saying that him and Patricia are no longer friends, and that she used to curate all of her comments, she used to censor any bad comment about her on her channel, she wanted to censor any bad comment about Mark on Mark's channel. I'm like, this is very out of character for Mark Sargent to say these kinds of things. You know, he usually plays a very straight bat. He usually is very diplomatic. For you to be saying these things about Patricia, who's only just made her comeback, I couldn't help it, Tim. I got sucked back into Flat Earth. I got sucked back into paying attention to it. And I've said before already, I'm not proud of it, but yeah, I have been paying a bit more attention to these clowns over the last few weeks. And it is a clown show, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's a clown show, it's a circus, but it's deeply entertaining, isn't it? And you get engrossed in the storylines and the characters and the he said, she said. It is reality TV on steroids. It's YouTube. It makes it feel more intimate, more personal. You can leave live chat comments while you're watching. If I didn't know better, Tim, I'd think someone was behind this for that very purpose, to generate an audience to sell to. What say you?
Seems like it. And it could just be organic, but regardless, there's so much going on that I'm not willing to tune it out. It's way too interesting and too entertaining. So I've decided to actually try and be one of the most informed persons on this topic. And so I dedicated a blog, my timosmond.space blog, to following Flat Earth drama. I pay attention to all the trolls. I copy and paste relevant comments. I keep up with the research because I'm interested in where this is all going. And Patty Steer having a dramatic disappearance and then a reemergence, that was something I thought was going to bring Mark back, her back into, I guess, a thing. But no, Mark pretty much said he's not into the, quote, self-help genre. So he was very dismissive of her work. On her part, she sounded very miffed. She said, I'm not going to talk about him, and then proceeded to talk about him for a couple hours. So clearly she's still, I guess, burned. And I had followed much of her comments in Karen B. and Stavely's streams, and I think she was trying to jump on the Mandela bandwagon, which I'm surprised she hasn't. But I can see that she kind of misses, I think she misses the spotlight. And as far as her comeback being about this narcissism thing, I've actually looked into that subject quite extensively. And there is this thing where people become a subject matter on anything, and then everybody is that thing. So everybody I don't like is a narcissist, or with the transvestigators, everybody I don't like is a tranny, and everybody does it. It's like this confirmation bias. And so maybe she did identify a toxic personality, but does that make her an expert on toxic personalities? Does it make her an expert witness? So now the story is she's a victim, and you're watching her build herself back up. And playing the victim at this stage, after taking the slings and arrows of YouTube comments for a couple years, it just doesn't seem authentic to me. It's almost like a posture, and I think she would have been better off just coming back, full on flat. I think she would have more respect, if you ask me.
Yeah, I get what you mean about this. If you identify something, or if you're into a certain topic, you think everyone is that thing. So if you're someone who thinks that you're a victim of narcissistic abuse or something, now you see everyone as a narcissist. Everyone you don't like is a narcissist. It's the same thing in the conspiracy subculture. Everybody you don't like, he's a shill, she's a shill, they're all shills. Exact same thing. I'm at the point where it's like, what does that word even mean? Sometimes if I'm on, say, Reddit conspiracy and someone says that word, I'm like, what does that word even mean to you? What does that word even mean? It just means poopy head. It just means person you don't like. That guy's a poopy head. I don't like that guy. He says things I don't like. He's a poopy head. That guy says things that make me feel uncomfortable. That guy says that Tesla's not real. Well, I love Tesla. So guess what? That guy, he's a poopy head. But they don't use the word poopy head. They use the word shill, as if it makes any difference. Exact same thing. And the conspiracy subculture is full of that crap. It's so toxic. That's why I like the fact that I've got a paywall on my website. That's why I like that Greg Carwood does, Crow 777 does, that you kind of do with your Patreon. Behind the paywall, that nonsense doesn't go on. The toxicity is all gone. But in the free and open area, where anyone can come along, guess what kind of people come along? People who want to call everyone else names. Basically, people who don't want to be constructive, don't want to make things better, don't want to uplift each other. No, just sit there and call each other names. And in our subculture, it's not narcissist, it's poopy head. But Patricia, she's on a mission to call a certain individual a narcissist. And of course, Tim, he fired back. Now tell me, did you watch every minute of Antonio's response?
I had the, I guess...
Be honest, because I did. I'll be honest.
I can hardly stand... I'm being honest. I can hardly stand Antonio Subarat, so I do get the troll versus trolls breakdown. He cuts out the unnecessary stuff, and I usually speed it up to 1.5 so I don't miss anything. And
with him, you can speed it up to 2.0 because he speaks so slowly. I listen to most podcasts on 1.5, but with him, 2.0, and I don't miss a thing.
And I figured he was going to relish this opportunity to possibly promote his book. He wrote a book about the sun, which I can't bring myself to read it. Mark Sargent released a book. I should probably read it just for review purposes. In fact, I'm going to do that. I really should. I picked it up a few times and took it out of my cart.
Take one for the team, Timmy. Take one for the team and read it, because God knows I'm probably not going to, and probably no members of johnlebon.com are going to read it. No disrespect to Antonio. So if you could do that for us, put together the review, subject yourself to it, and report back to us with all the key details, that would be much appreciated. You can do the recon for us.
So I've been keeping up with it a bit. I think it's kind of sad at this point. Like, I think she could have come back stronger. Mark apparently is not going to go back to her. As far as this accusation of shills and everything else, I see it everywhere. It's not just in Flat Earth necessarily. I had a visitor at my channel last night, Marfugal News. I'm not a follower of Marfugal News, but he has a large channel on YouTube, and I think he has a substantial following there, and then he's moved to DLive. So he drops by my channel, and he puts a donation or something, so we see him on the screen, and my chat room is flooded with people saying, don't listen to Marfugal, he's disinformation. So my response immediately is, when somebody says, don't look behind the curtain, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to research this guy later. That's usually my response now. I think anybody who's anonymously going to make accusations doesn't have any skin in the game. If it's a video and they're breaking down someone, an actual critique or a blog post, sure, I'll read it and take it seriously. But these days, I just I do the opposite of what the Anons tell me.
Yeah, the whole Paige Shields thing. When I first got involved in the conspiracy subculture, I kind of bought into the Paige Shields thing. Because when a human being steps into a culture, whether it's a work office culture or a sporting team culture, or they marry into a new family and they go and mix with their wife's family and they have their own culture, we conform as humans. We naturally conform to a culture. Part of that is conscious and part of that is non-conscious, unconscious, subconscious, whatever word you want to use. So when you first get involved in conspiracy subculture, if everyone is accusing each other of being a shill and telling you that there's shills everywhere, it's natural for you to believe that and to go along with that. And so to an extent, that's what I did. Whereas now I'm like, come on, man. Paid shills sent to do what exactly? To do what? To disinfo the what? 1,000 people who give a shit about any of this? Really? And why? Like, the so-called elite, they're putting the truth in plain sight. They give us this lunar module, the 1969 lunar lander module, which you can go and look at high-definition photos of now. They're not hiding this. High-def photos, and it's made of cardboard, aluminium, curtain rods. You can even see sticky tape. Okay? That's the truth in plain sight. So why would they give us the truth in plain sight and make it obvious, but then, for some reason, pay jokers to come along and disinfo us? To me, that's ridiculous. Now, does that mean that everybody here is sincere? No. I think there's other reasons why people might come along to this scene and be insincere and mislead people. And in Flat Earth, Tim, I'm pretty convinced there's a few people who are doing exactly that. And in hour 2, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think is going on. But we need to move on because we've got a couple more topics to talk about right now. You mentioned Mirage Man. I've heard you speaking about this a bit lately. Tell us about Mirage Man. How did you first see this film? And why do you think it's so relevant to what's going on right now in the so-called truth scene?
Okay, Mirage Man is important because it does confirm the existence of shills. I came across it. It was part of my research into UFOs, and this is a topic I've looked into a lot lately because there was a drop-off on UFO sightings right when there was an uptick on the number of people carrying smartphones with cameras in their pockets. And I drummed this point again and again for about 2 years, from 2017, 2018. Where's the UFOs? We all have cameras now. Well, 2019 was a big year for UFO sightings, and I don't know if we had something to do with it, but they made a point to emphasize UFOs everywhere. Well, in my research, I came across Mirage Man, which is a documentary, and it centers around an individual who lived just a few miles from where I am, close to an Air Force base, Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. And this guy used to see craft taking off, which he thought were UFOs, flying alien technology. So he started basically starting conspiracy theories about this stuff. One day he goes to the military base, meets with the general and others, and he says, hey, I've been recording stuff. I think there's UFO activity above your base, and I want to share my findings. So they feigned an interest. They had a good relationship with the guy, and he leaves thinking everything's cool. Well, the Air Force sets up, well, actually the NSA sets up across the street from his house, and they begin spying on him. They begin transmitting messages to him, making him think that there is an alien invasion imminent from a planet like Earth that has run out of water, and they're about to take over. So he tells his Air Force contact. His Air Force contact shares information with him about underground bases in Dulce, New Mexico. And before you know it, the Air Force is actually feeding misinformation, disinformation, and just straight lies to this conspiracy theorist who's already been rendered paranoid. They encourage him to start a UFO conference, and they use the conference for the purpose of gathering intelligence on anybody who's seen anything classified. Faces, pictures, getting into their lives. So this guy was used to help fish people who might have been seeing too many things around military bases around the world, around the country. So Mirage Man is basically about how they do have the resources to run psychological operations at targeted individuals in order to influence public perception. And this guy, who was the target of this, was later let in on it. His long-term friend, who he thought was a friend, said, hey, I got to tell you, everything I shared with you, including the satellite photos, it's all fake. UFO abductions are fake. And the thing is, he said, I can't walk him back out of it because here he is at UFO conferences spreading misinformation and other people are echoing it back. Like you alluded to earlier, somebody can just say they saw something too and they get credibility within the group. Well, that's exactly what happened. So the UFO subculture really became a cult of believers, but it was started by the Air Force.
Okay, so I'm just looking at Mirage Men here on Wikipedia. It says, Mirage Men is a 2013 documentary film directed by John Lundberg, written by Mark Pilkington. Does the name Mark Pilkington mean anything to you?
Off the top of my head, this is my first time encountering these guys.
Yeah, cool. And it was co-directed by Roland Denning. And it was premiered in 2013. And Mirage Men is about how the US government used mythology to cover up their advanced technology. It prominently features Richard Doty, a retired special agent who worked for AFOSI, whatever that means, the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. Oh, okay, that's what it means. Mark Pilkington's book about the project, also called Mirage Men, was published in 2010. Now, Mark Pilkington says here, is a writer, publisher, curator, and musician with particular interest in the fringes of knowledge, culture, and belief. He wrote books Mirage Men and Far Out, 101 Strange Tales from Science's Outer Edge, blah, 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 blah. And in 2012, he appeared in an episode of Stargazing Live, a BBC Two series about astronomy. So there you go. His website is www.strangeattractor.co.uk. Seems like a strange dude. But anyway, the point you're trying to make here is that if this documentary is to be believed, the US government was basically misleading a dupe, like a well-meaning dupe, a useful idiot. They basically misled him into believing that he had contact with UFOs or that he had special information, and they encouraged him to start a conference and basically round up all of the believers in this so-called phenomenon of UFOs and helped to drive a fake movement for a fake thing. Is that kind of the angle that you're going with here?
Exactly. And the very first line where it talked about the U.S. military, the U.S. government was using mythology to cover up their advanced technology. That was another point here. The use of mythology. In other words, it's just part of the PSYOP industrial complex where they use stories and narratives so that people don't report on objective reality accurately. And again, this movie shows that they were willing to basically mess with somebody's mind for decades, basically ruining his life. I think he even, and this is the story they talk about it, he even gets committed for a time. And he never let go of the delusions that were handed to him.
Do you think it's possible that some of the leading flat earthers have also been, in one way or another, misled intentionally by other people, potentially nefarious people?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I think so is we have evidence, and this was in one of the talks with Russian Vids, and this is a great one. The second talk, he was talking to Rick Hummer. Rick Hummer had to take a bathroom break, which he let us all know, and he puts his friend John on the phone. John was a cop who was also at the conference, and John kind of unloaded, and he let everybody know that despite the lies, the organizer of the conference, who said he had no idea, he had actually worked with and coordinated with Jimmy Kimmel. It was him and Mark Sargent coordinated with Jimmy Kimmel to have these, quote, undercover people come in and create these little hit pieces. So we already have it here where the shepherds leading the flock are working for the other side. And Hummer himself admitted in this interview with Russian Vids that he knows Jimmy Kimmel, used to date Jimmy Kimmel's cousin, knows her sister. And not only that, but Hummer and Russian Vids have been friends for years as well, before Flat Earth even. So a lot of these people at the front of this thing who keep themselves in front when they can know each other, they're networked, and it really, I think it's bigger than Flat Earth, if you ask me. It almost looks like controlled opposition, and I think that that's a dead giveaway with this Jimmy Kimmel thing.
Yeah, so I interviewed a lot of these Flat Earth people back in 2015 with the Baller Skeptic Roundtable. And so we'd speak for an hour or two during the chat, and then we'd have our after call chat, which was obviously not broadcast. And I got to get some insight into who these people are. And some of them I think are completely genuine. They believe what they're saying. They believe that Flat Earth is going to become this big thing and they're at the front of it. They're genuine. Whether they're correct or not, they're genuine. But there was also one or two who I got the impression, no, this person is not necessarily completely sincere, was the impression I got. And looking at what's happened over the last 5 years, it does seem as though a few people were helping to move all of this in the direction that they wanted, for whatever reason. I've got my theories about that. So we can come back and talk about that in the second hour of the call. Before we wrap this one up, though, I want your opinion. Do you know about this guy called Polarization Nation Media? Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes, Polarization Nation Media. I used to listen to his work. It was pre-auto hoaxing, so I'd have to go check it out again. But I remember, I think he's one of the individuals who even spoke on the Bill Hicks, Alex Jones thing. But go on. What about?
Well, I use the word synchronicity to describe, or synchromysticism to describe this idea that, why is there a black monolith across from the World Trade Center towers on September 11, 2001? Why does it have 2001 as the last four digits of its phone number? And why would we care? Because in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, released in 1968, the black monolith is this central concept, this central idea of when you touch a certain thing, when it touches you, it changes your reality, right? This black monolith, which we now all have in front of us. I've got a black monolith at 90 degrees in front of me right now, and I do for most of the day. And so do most people. They're walking around with a black monolith in their pocket. So synchromysticism is this idea of exploring, well, these connections that we're seeing, is there something to it? Now, other people come along and call that predictive programming, yeah? Or like, say, some of the popular, why they put the 9/11 in the artwork before the event? They call this predictive programming. These are different angles of looking at the same thing. Polarization Nation Media also talks about these kinds of topics, but he calls it unified code theory. But it seems to me a lot of what he's talking about is just a rehashed version of the SyncBook people. Anyhow, a few years ago, he claimed to have doxed Russian vids. And so the reason I ask all of this is because you said that Russian vids is anonymous, like he doesn't show his face, doesn't go on camera, nobody knows his so-called real name. You know, he's keeping a low profile, which I totally understand. I don't have a problem with that personally, unless the same person then criticizes others for doing that, in which case there's obvious hypocrisy. But Polarization Nation Media claims to have gotten the real details of Russian vids. So I was wondering if you were familiar with any of this.
I think I might have heard something, some connections to MTV Cribs or something tenuous there I could probably dig into. But yeah, I always gave him that. I'm like, well, I understand. You want to have a wall up so you can focus on your work. It's important to remain anonymous. I mean, I would remain behind a pseudonym if I could, but I actively have people who want, they think they can scare you off by doxing you, which it's kind of it's a tactic. But anyway, I never really called him out on it until just the other day when he was accusing Eric Dubé of being anonymous.
At that point, it becomes a case of hypocrisy, isn't it? It's like, well, to criticize somebody else for doing what you're doing, that's hypocrisy, isn't it? So I get where you're coming from. But yeah, so what we'll do is in the second hour, maybe we can go into more detail about old mate Polarization Nation Media and some of his revelations back in the day. But we need to wrap up the first hour of the call. In the second hour, we're going to talk about Jonah the Science Guy, who I knew almost nothing about until a couple of days ago. And I attended this conference here in Chiang Mai. And one of the presenters is talking all about search engine optimization, SEO. Find out which pages on your website are ranking high, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? I've never really looked into SEO. So what I did was I started Googling John LeBon. And the first image that comes up is a rather unflattering photo of me from a live stream that I did a few years ago. And it's just me, like, you know how if you screenshot someone in the middle of what they're saying, you can, depending on their facial expressions, make them look silly? You know what I mean? Well, and you can do that with any person who's ever made a video. Well, what this Jonah the Science dude has done is exactly that, and he's put that photo on an article where he claims that I used to make claims about the Earth being flat, which I didn't. And then the two videos that I supposedly made these flat Earth claims, they weren't flat Earth claims. They were ball Earth skeptic claims. I wasn't talking about the Earth being flat. I was saying, here's the story of the so-called scientists. They claim they can weigh the entire Earth with heavy balls in a shed, and I don't believe they can. That's not a flat Earth claim. I'm not claiming the Earth is flat. I'm saying the official story, here's the problem. So he's got a page where he has a photo that makes me look silly, and which is well within his rights to do that. But he's at the top of the SEO rankings for John LeBon with his image. So anyone who Googles John LeBon is going to see a silly image of me and then claims that I'm a flat earther, which is not the case, or claims that I used to be a flat earther, which also is not the case. So these are lies. These are intentionally deceptive lies, as far as I'm concerned. And this same joker you've had a run-in with, Tim. So we're going to talk about that in hour number 2. And then we're also going to talk about this idea of how do you spread your ideas. If you have good ideas to share, good questions to share, how do you spread them? We're in a subculture where that's a huge taboo. It's like, what? You want to have a paywall to support what you're trying to do? You're evil, you're a shill, you're a poopy head, blah, 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 blah. Or what? You want to use marketing techniques that every other industry uses to get your ideas out there? You're a shill, you're a poopy head, blah, 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 blah. Many people have been held back by this toxic taboo culture in the conspiracy subculture. You've broken through that. I've broken through that. But even people like Crow 777 have broken through that. And I think more people can once they realize that the people trying to hold them down are crabs in a bucket, loser mentality clowns. So we're going to talk about all of that and more in hour 2. But we need to wrap up hour 1, Tim. So let the listeners know, where can they find your work? Where can they find the second hour? Where can people go to listen to the rest of this call?
Great. Okay, so pretty much I like to send everybody to infiniteplainsociety.com because that's where my latest live streams are always going to be embedded, and it's the hub. That's pretty much it. Now, I try to keep that, which is the organization, the think tank, and the network, separate from my own particular obsession with the flat earth and the people around it. So if you want to follow my flat earth blog, it's timosman.space. But yeah, my transition from jumping YouTube channel to YouTube channel, fighting to be monetized, struggling to stay online, I gave that up and I went full monetization and paywall, and it's changed everything because now I have more time, I'm more focused, and my sub count climbs and it doesn't get knocked down. So I would like to speak more in the second hour for, on this topic for anybody who's a content creator. How can you survive if your content is controversial and eminently censorable?
Excellent. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. And for my members here at johnlebon.com, you can find hour number 2. It'll be right below hour number 1 on the upload. And for Tim's Patreons, you'll find it at patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society, I believe is the link. That'll do us for hour 1. I'll see you for hour 2 in just a moment, Tim. Thanks for being here, and we'll chat again in just a moment.